Well, thank you, Ann. I am so pleased and proud to be with you here today. I think it's a really great testament to this university, this Ag Communications program, the number of extremely accomplished alumni who have showed up to be with us all today. So it's been very impressive to me, even though I have to acknowledge I was also not a University of Illinois student. But that's right. That's right. I need my graduate degree, so I'm ready. All right, let's see. There we go. Well, I'm going to touch on some things, and I hope I can just leave you with a couple of resources or maybe the motivation to go to our website or to an allied website that I'm going to tell you about as well so you can learn more because I know we have a lot of great things to talk about. But just some little background on our organization. IFIC was founded in 1985 to communicate science-based information on food safety and nutrition issues to those opinion leaders consumers are most likely to trust, and those are journalists, health professionals, government officials, academicians like yourselves and others. We're supported by the broad-based food, beverage, and agricultural industry, about currently 35 multinational companies primarily. And our really key to delivering credible messages over the years is developing partnerships with who we think consumers would find the most credible organizations on any given topic. So if it's food allergy, it's the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, the leading physicians group there. We've worked with the Food and Drug Administration, USDA, on the nutrition communications to consumers, with FDA on food ingredients. So all around, we try to find out who consumers would trust, ally with them, and we do the legwork and they do the review and endorsement of our products. So this is our foundation's website at foodinsight.org, where we have a wealth of information, consumer research, oftentimes the bottom line on issues that may have just broken and you hadn't heard the information. Sometimes you can go get the quick information here. We have a blog, and we also have a monthly newsletter that's free, and you can sign up to receive that there as well. So I hope many of you will take advantage of these resources, and I hope many of you are doing so already. Well, Ann wanted me to talk about sources where consumers get information. And this is a bit of a busy slide, but this is a consumer data point from our food and health survey that we do. And when you take a look at where consumers get information, this really is the reality. Consumers get information, they're bombarded with lots of sources of information. So it becomes more difficult to get a message to a consumer these days in this multimedia world of blogs and networks. So we don't just have 3 major networks anymore, of course. But still, when you look at where consumers say they're getting their information, in this case on food safety, about 73% cite at least one media source. It's just that media is broken up a number of different ways. But things such as the food label, friends and family, government, on down the list, a lot of different sources. Well, as we know, the old adage, you have to hear a message about 7 times from 7 different sources that you trust before it's going to sink in. And I would say with the explosion of multimedia, that's probably more like a rule of 10 now, that you're going to have to hear it from 10 sources you trust. So we do see a change when we ask, who do you believe? Who are your most trusted sources for food safety? Media falls down a bit, about 20% in terms of trust, and you see the government agencies actually come up a little bit higher there. Health associations, medical professionals, registered dietitians, and others who aren't necessarily talking directly to consumers, but those are the ones consumers would like to hear from. So those are where they would like to get that information. Well, one of the things that we have gotten involved in over the past couple of years is trying to deal with the frustration that you've already heard about in this conference, this idea that the food supply is under attack, and we no longer seem to appreciate the many benefits of modern food production that were really taken for granted. I always like to cite my aunt, who was a county extension agent in Kentucky, and when I was a child, I heard her talk about the benefits of picking, these great tomatoes, at their peak of ripeness, canning them, and pulling those out in January, February, when they're at their peak, both in not only just in taste, but in nutrition and lots of other things. And that whole wonder that was really understood in the 1960s, really now is taken for granted by most of our current consumers. So we have worked on a project, we did some consumer research, and we've developed what we call an Understanding Our Food Communications Toolkit. Now this would be a pretty basic piece of information to most of you in this audience, but we think this is something that's important to get to as many consumers as we can. So we wanted to clear up information about modern food production, processed foods, large-scale agriculture, and we designed this for people who communicate with consumers, but it could be used by almost anybody. And we feel like a target audience for this is primary grocery shoppers and those who, when we survey them, say that they're somewhat unfavorable towards processed foods or large-scale agriculture. And this, Chris set this up beautifully, that what are processed foods? So often you hear, even from some of our trusted experts, well, if you're concerned about your diet, don't eat processed foods. Well, that would be pretty tough to do, as Chris pointed out. And we found it's helpful to lay out for consumers kind of as a continuum. Food processing produces really most of our food supply. Even most organic foods are processed foods. And when we explain this to consumers through this information, it does come very rational to them. And so it takes this stigma away from food processing. And so I think we need to get more of this information out. So whether it's minimally processed or frozen meals and packages to extend freshness, there are many benefits of processed foods that consumers do appreciate, even if they don't readily admit it. Well, I won't go through all of these, but we've developed through consumer research, through advice from academic professionals that we work with, 4 platforms of messages that we think are effective in communicating these benefits of modern food processing. So one, dealing with safe, tasty, high quality, and affordable food. Those are very important characteristics to consumers. And so pointing out how food processing delivers that to consumers in a modern food system is appreciated by many consumers. 2, having that endless choice of foods and ingredients throughout the year is something that consumers do appreciate. And it is food production and sourcing from around the globe that brings us all the wonderful things that we have to choose from. Having that time-saving, nutritious products, as Chris pointed out, not just making bread. There aren't many people who make bread, so they don't have time for much else. And a lot of times just heating something up that's been purchased at the grocery store is considered cooking these days by many families. And with all the travel I do, I certainly take advantage of these foods and am happy to serve them to my family. And it is really food processing and this whole food system that makes all of this possible. And again, this is common sense to many of us here, but getting those favorite foods available all year long is very important. Well, we tested this communications toolkit with 2 different sets of consumers before we completed it and finished it up. So one, primary grocery shoppers, we found after reading this material increased almost 20% in their views towards food processing. And another set of consumers, who were those somewhat unfavorable toward processed foods that really did not start out with any favorability, increased 40% in terms of their support of the concepts behind food processing. So we believe this really delivers a message of the need to get these, which again you might think are very basic messages, in front of many more consumers, and it needs to be done in a credible way. So just to summarize what we found, that consumers are generally favorable toward processed foods once provided a correct definition, what they encompass, and the benefits they can provide. But it is important to incorporate the whole context around functional foods and the message concepts together, because they each represent a piece of what is delivered to consumers, and any focus on any one without the whole may not be as effective. So this is the communications toolkit. It's available to download from our website. We hope that many of you will take advantage of this. We recently had a media briefing in downtown Chicago on some food topics, and American Dietetic Association, which is now the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, spokesperson came up and said how effective she had been using this at the grassroots level with audiences. So this can be customized and used effectively, and I hope that many of you will take advantage of this. Well, we've already heard about the need to tell a story about agriculture. And, sort of makes me think that I grew up as a child and was a big boxing fan. And you remember Muhammad Ali in the 70s, and he's the heavyweight champion back when boxing was at its peak. And he developed a method called rope-a-dope to let his opponents punch themselves out. And he defeated George Foreman and took back the heavyweight championship. And I feel like that technique was so successful and so popular that the food and agriculture industry adopted it for 30 years. We have allowed critics of agriculture to essentially be unanswered for 30 years, maybe just assuming they'd punch themselves out and would go away, but I'm not sure we're going to have the same success that Muhammad Ali had if we don't speak up more, if we don't tell the story as you heard it earlier. So I'm not sure we have to fight back, but I think we do have to tell the story accurately in an interesting way. We have many of our critics who have done a better job of telling interesting, compelling stories. They may not always be completely factual, but boy, they sure make it interesting and compelling. And we've got to find out how to make modern food production interesting and compelling. So that's something our organization is working on. But we knew that we can't do it with a communications toolkit. We can't do it on our own. And that led us to bind together with many different organizations and form the Alliance to Feed the Future. And this is an alliance that was formed just a year ago. We launched on Ag Day last March, so we're just about a year old. And the mission is to multiply the impact of separate efforts to build understanding of food production and technology issues among stakeholders to balance the public dialogue on modern ag and large-scale food production. And just to give you an example, we have members from industry organizations, universities, professional societies. You see the whole range of groups. Many are represented in this room. And I hope some of you will look at this and find out groups that are not part of our alliance that you think should be, and we'd love to hear from you. And it takes me 3 slides to point these out, but I definitely wanted to highlight and thank and have a shout out to Jim Evans and Katie Abrams here at the university with the communications program. We're pleased to have them as a member of the alliance, and in fact, Katie Abrams' class on managing campaigns has actually just used our alliance as a model to develop social media strategies for us. So we had a real-life classroom example, and we are now working on this right now with our web people back in the audience, working on implementing some of these key recommendations they gave us, and we hope that you'll see even improvements to how we all communicate with each other and the social media techniques we use. So thanks again for the commitment from the university here, and maybe I will take credit for being a student now of the University of Illinois because I've learned from them so much. So with that, I'll enjoy joining the panel soon, and I hope this has given you some things to think about, and I think the key is we all have to work together. None of us can do it on our own. Thank you.